Hi, and welcome to session one of Conversations with a Yogi. Today, we are talking about the hamstrings. So, Conversations with a Yogi is a new series that I'll be offering for continuing education credits for Yoga Alliance. This can be also just great education for any yoga teacher or aspiring yoga teacher. You will still learn plenty if you are a personal trainer, massage therapist, anything working with the body. So I hope this is helpful. This is our first session, and I plan on offering at least one per month, going over different parts of the body and then also possibly different parts of the mindset as well. Of course, your feedback is always needed to help anything continue and grow and become better. So I always appreciate any feedback that you can offer. Today's presentation, we will cover what are your hamstrings, their function, common injuries, how to heal the hamstrings, yoga and your hamstrings, and then how to get those continuing education credits. So, this is everything that we will be covering within this session. I am your presenter today. This is me with makeup in a yoga pose, and my hair looks good. So I'm Izzy Nally, and I am a yoga therapist, which means I have over 1,000 hours of studies. So the yoga therapy certification is 1,000 hours. However, I've also done far more with all the continuing education credits that I have went to and workshops and all of that stuff. I'm sure you know if you are a yogi or even personal trainer, you get quite addicted to continuing to learn about the body, always finding out more and wanting to learn more, which is probably why you're here listening to this, because not only do you want to help yourself, but you also want to help other people. I also have certifications in corrective alignment, and that includes a degree in kinesiology, certification in sports medicine, shadowing and internships with physical therapy clinics and things of that sort. And then, of course, the 1,000 hours of practice, which is actually added to the yoga studies. So that means that I've been teaching, actually, I think I'm getting close to a little over 2,000 now, um, of how many hours I have actually worked with teaching yoga. And then I have about another 1,000 hours of just one on one working with clients, both of which I have learned a lot from. Which, if you are new to yoga, you will find that the more you teach, that is actually where you learn a lot, because people ask you questions and you realize you don't have the answer. So, hopefully this helps you out when someone asks you about their hamstrings in the near future. So let's start with meeting your hamstrings. So the hamstrings are actually three muscles. You'll find that most people that hasn't had anatomy, that are just attending your classes, they think that their hamstrings are one big muscle. They aren't really sure where those insertion points are, so it's really great to educate them on this. And so these are the three muscles. They insert up and behind the glutes, and then they insert just below the knee. This is really important to know, because when we create these movements, such as bending the knee, the hamstring is working. So if you've ever been to like an aerobic style class and you're doing like a butt kick style movement, you will feel that hamstring engage. Your hamstrings also will engage when you do this forward fold. So, like when we're doing this flat back or that halfway lift in sun salutations, but this also is true when we're weightlifting and we do something like a deadlift. So where the weight is closer to the floor, we're keeping a flat back and fairly straight legs, and we're coming up. We're squeezing the glutes, working the lower back, but those hamstrings are also working. So the bending of the knee and that forward fold, which we will get into here shortly, these forward folds and what can happen with the hips will affect the hamstrings, and the hamstring tightness or looseness will also affect the hips. Of course, you can see that it attaches below the knee, so a tight hamstring can also cause knee issues. So those are also important things to notice when you've got a client with tight hamstrings and also knee issues. You can really work on getting those hamstrings loose and see if that will help with any of those knee problems, as well as with lower back and hip issues as well. Um, so just take a look at these three muscles. You will see that one is predominantly on the outer edge of the leg, and then we've got two that are more on that inner side. These things are important to know because when you're in these yoga postures, like something like a runner's lunge or even pyramid pose, and we're feeling this big tightening of the hamstrings, a person's hamstring might be tighter on one of these muscles and less on others. And this will cause their hips to sway in one direction or the other, or maybe they're able to drop straight back, or maybe they're not. So this will affect their yoga postures, and they're also just their general movement patterns. Okay, which brings us in to injuries. So injuries are really good to know because as a fitness professional, including a yoga teacher, uh, people might have a serious injury and they'll keep pushing past it. And we need to be aware that at some point you might have to tell them, or in fact, it's just really common, safe practice to ask them, have you gone to the doctor? Have you gotten an x ray, MRI, whatever it might be? This would be more of an MRI situation. Um, because if they've been experiencing a lot of pain and it's only getting worse, it might be more than just a couple fiber tears or tight hamstrings. So if we're starting to see some really big problems coming out of it, or problems that are really extending past time or worsening, we really should be recommending them to get to a doctor. So even as a yoga therapist, I am still not a physical therapist, although I give people physical therapy exercises and I help them heal. A physical therapist will have the ability to work more in that diagnosis field. I can tell people possibilities of what their injuries might be, and give them that like 99% range, but I can't give them 100%. And a physical therapist would be able to find more acute injuries. So knowing when something is out of your scope of practice, and even a physical therapist often refers them to other doctors just to double check things, because there's often injuries that you can't see. So things that will be irritating the person. So these common injuries and complaints. And complaints are what we're hearing a lot within a yoga class. And so we're hearing about the hips are tight, the low back is always sore. And these are even things that sometimes bring people to yoga, because we do help release a lot of the hamstrings within a yoga class. So this will be like a pulling in the low back and hips. They're really tight. It's really hard for them to reach over and touch their toes. They're just going to complain that they have tight hamstrings and they're avoiding in certain movements. This can be causing imbalances in the body. So maybe it's really hard for them to balance because their hamstrings are so tight, it's hard for them to activate that muscle. Or maybe they're just to the point where they avoid bending over because it's getting so uncomfortable. Uh, this could be slight tears. Um, Tears can be a lot of different things. So a tear could be a big tear. So as you see here on this first image on the left side is a hamstring tendon tear. And that would create a lot of instability in that hip. Typically, they start losing control of their hips altogether. Um, that would definitely be something that we would pretty obvious for the yoga teacher to notice that something isn't quite right. This would be very painful, and some people will still ignore it. So, being aware of that, that different people's pain tolerances are different. Now, when it comes into the areas closer to the knee, which you'll see on the image of the far right, it is possible to get fiber tears. Fiber tears, I have actually had some myself when I was learning yoga school many years ago, about 11 or 12 years ago from when I'm recording this. Um, I had experienced some fiber tears because our teacher didn't warm us up enough, and we were going into a pretty deep triangle because back in that day we weren't really trauma informed. Um, we were told to push into the pose as much as possible and to push yourself into your yoga poses, which we now know that that is not the best and wisest thing to do. And I can explain that on another education video. However, fiber tears, from my experience, it was this popping feeling as I dropped into the pose, and it was like this warm rush of like water or heat that filled the area, and then it was painful afterwards. And so that could just be a couple fibers within tendons or muscles that are tearing. And then that's rest, ice, elevate, and try to really to rest that and let it recover. However, there can be a larger tear. Larger tears tend to happen from athletes, such as soccer players, football players, occasionally with baseball players, people that are in CrossFit or some kind of extreme jerky style movement, and possibly even with running for excessive fiber tears that just keep happening. And again, that pain tolerance might have built up. Um, this can also cause a lot of strain into the glutes, which you'll see in that middle picture, which then can lead into SI joint issues, which would be around that tailbone and lower back. You will notice this when people go to do a leg lift from downward facing dog and the heel cannot lift straight up. And a lot of times they just kind of instinctively go to that big open hip. And it might feel good to stretch the front side, it's easing up on the back side. But in fact, that could irritate that SI joint even more because it's compressing on it. And what we would really want to do is to help open that up, which would be lifting the heel straight up. And if you've ever been to one of my classes, you know that I stress this in my class as well. All right, so let's look on to some things that can cause these hamstrings to get tight. So, taking a look at this photo, these are really important things to look at with your clients. This is, I say, the power of mountain pose right here is we're really trying to help recorrect this posture. I think mountain pose should be in every single class, and we should spend at least 2 to 5 minutes within mountain pose to really drop into our body and feel that alignment. Because these postures only start getting worse and worse and worse, and they lead to chronic issues. So you'll see the red shows the tight areas in the back. And so if you don't have one of these images, look it up on Google, save this photo on your phone, reference it all the time until you have it memorized. And you will be amazed at how you start seeing this not only in your yoga classes, but just out in public in general. and you can start really seeing where people's problems are. And then you see this posture and you say, I know exactly where your pains are. And I know exactly what yoga poses you need. So here in this first one for lordosis, this is that low back. They've got this excessive arch, or they're almost sticking their belly out, and you can see their core muscles are weak. And in all of these, in fact, our core muscles are weak. We should always have a little bit of core work within our yoga practice as well. And so this big excessive arch in the lower back, it's also straining a lot of the glutes. And then if you look very carefully, it's all the way down that hamstring. And basically what they're doing is they're pulling their hamstrings upward as they're also locking their knees and pulling it downward. So they're creating a lot of tension in that lower back and in the hamstring. This middle one as well, there is a little bit of tension in the hamstring, but most of it is all up in the back, with a little bit pulling, and these people would have a lot of pain and problem areas within the hips. Then the third one, the one on the far right, that sway back, this is where people don't have hamstrings. They are probably extremely limber, but they don't utilize that muscle very much at all. They are typically going to have a lot of front hip issues, inner thigh issues. The quads are tight, and they're going to have a lot of knee pain behind that kneecap because all of their stress is going there. And then they're going to have a lot of neck and shoulder pain as well. Their hips are weak, their glutes are weak. They need a lot of lateral movement. They need a lot of postural exercise and work, as all these do. So I want to express this to you because within every posture that we go into, especially our warriors, we really need to pay attention to what's going on in people's hips. Because if you look at each one of these, you can see that it's how they're placing their hips and the posture of the spine. But again, the hips are pushed forward. There's this pelvic tilt, tilting forward. So imagine your pelvis is a soup bowl and whether you're letting it spill out or not. And so really teaching people how to activate almost those like Kegel style muscles in this zipping up through the belly. Now, not everyone understands this zipping up of the belly. So if you're going to explain that to people, please have different ways of explaining it. Because for females, we will understand this zip up a little bit better than what a male would, because the males don't have all the same female muscles that we do. A common analogy that I utilize is, imagine when you're going to get into some really cold water and then the pelvis touches that really cold water and you've got that clenching almost, and it activates that deep lower core. That would be that muscle. And so within each posture, just again, watch the spine, watch the tilt of the hips, always cueing people to keep that collarbone open. So if you look at these pictures again, imagine if their collarbone was open and they were squeezing those shoulder blades back and down. And then again, they were zipping that belly button in and really working on elongating our spine. Now, we don't want to completely eliminate this curvature of the spine. So this slight arch in the lower back and this slight rounding in the upper back, and then the curve of the neck. Those are there so that we can get shock support for movements. However, when we're in a yoga posture, we aren't absorbing shock, which is this like bouncing style movement. We need it for walking. So we don't want to encourage people to eliminate those. So be careful of that. I have seen some styles of yoga that really encourages taking a different formation of the spine, and it affects people's walking in different ways. So being careful of that. And we can go into walking. Oh, I could do I used to teach at the University of Louisville, and I had an entire semester worth of walking that I would teach people. So that is a lot of information there as well. Okay, so beyond all of that, which I could go on and on for hours and days, what about how to heal the hamstrings? So a lot of times the instant response to healing the hamstrings is, well, we must stretch them. If they're tight, then let's stretch them and then they'll get better. Um, but as you just saw in this previous slide, it is not all about just stretching them. A lot of it is we need to correct our daily posture. So, teaching people what to be aware of while they're on their mat or within their workout session is extremely important so that they can then become aware of that throughout the day and catch themselves. It's not going to happen overnight. It will take probably 90 days, which is the magic number, of constantly watching that over and over and over. And then they will see this big difference and rewrite their habits because they are going to keep dropping into that habit. We do want to move and activate before stretching. And this is reasons why we do utilize things like sun salutations or these warrior poses, a lot of heat into the body before we would sink into these deep stretches. And so these are things that we would want to watch out for if we are teaching a restorative or something like that, a yin class or any type of stretches. Make sure that if the muscles aren't extremely warm, if we didn't go through that in a warm up, then we would really want to make sure that we're using props. If the hamstrings are extremely tight and just to do sun salutations to warm them up is already causing this huge stretch for them, then they would need to use props. Don't overdo it. Don't overtrain it. Allow them and give them permission to utilize these props, to baby it. And even if you don't have props, that you can place your hands on your knees. When you forward fold, you can rest your elbows into your knees. Don't just drop into a full hamstring stretch if those hamstrings are not ready for it, especially if they are a new or beginner yoga person. So, always giving your students permission to modify, because as a yoga instructor or a fitness professional, sometimes we are unaware of what a tight hamstring really feels like and how much pain it can cause. And of course, we don't want to cause them any pain. We don't want them to associate pain in a very negative way with their yoga practice or with their exercise practice. And then, my favorite, the most important part that so many people forget, just like meditation for the mind, we need to release these every day. And this doesn't mean to do your pyramid every day, to stress them and stretch them, but it literally means to lay on the floor on your belly, put a pillow underneath your feet, and just let those hamstrings relax. Lay on the floor and just relax. So often we do not do this. We do not just let our body recover. We're either stressing them out, working them out, stretching them out, and we feel like we have to constantly be doing something to them in some stimulation to get them to heal. Well, you have to sleep every night, and not always do we let our hamstrings relax while we're sleeping. So we need to make sure that we're doing it intentionally. There's great little meditations that you can do. I actually learned one not too long ago that I absolutely loved. Um, you were resting in the posture, and she said to send ohms to the body part internally. So just imagining your own vibration going down and healing that body part. And I thought that was beautiful. It felt great. My one that I've always done is imagining that I'm internally massaging that muscle. If it feels tight or dry, I imagine like I've got some juicy coconut oil on my hands and I'm sitting there massaging it and releasing it, or maybe even this cleaning if it feels yucky and dirty. Sometimes my hips feel like I've got too much emotions, and so I visually drop in and imagine I'm cleaning out my hips like I'm spring cleaning my apartment. So I hope that helps on ideas of that. Okay, so what do we do in the yoga practice? So these are some of those poses I was talking about, and that pelvic hip, allowing it not to drop too much. Even in this posture in the upper left-hand corner, it shows she's at a 90-degree angle, but this would be her version of the forward fold. This is not her version of flat back. Flat back would have the collarbone open and activating the core. This would be her version of that forward fold. So note that she is still getting plenty of a hamstring stretch. If you can see that straight line going down, it is in extension, and that is where we would want it. If they can get to this 90-degree angle without hurting, that's fantastic. You might have some clients that need to stack 2 blocks on top of each other just to feel comfortable with a forward fold while they're still feeling a stretch. My absolute favorite one to do with the yoga practice is the strap. Um, It's a little series, and I'm sure a lot of the yoga teachers are aware of this, where you have the strap on the foot. Of course, you can place it underneath of you, or you can hold it with the hand. And we're pumping the leg up and down to warm up the hamstring, and then we're stretching the leg. We're pulling the toe towards the face. We open up away from the body, and then we also then move it across the body into that giant twist. Those are beautiful. Recommend them to your clients to do them 3 to 4 days a week. It's a beautiful thing to open up the hips, help the hamstrings, and get a lot of mobility going in the legs. There are lots of little yoga put together pictures like this one in the bottom left, that shows you how to do the splits. Um, by no means do we want to tell our clients, like, we're going to do the splits, and this is what I want you to do to eventually be able to do the splits, because that's so far out of their mind, that we wouldn't want to say that word to them. However, if you know they're going to be coming to your classes regularly, start practicing this almost every class and watch them grow and change. And I have plenty of clients that within a 2-year span, they're doing things they would have never imagined. And I never told them they were going to do it, but I helped guide them there. And because if I would have told them in the beginning, they never would have believed me. So there are lots of yoga postures that will definitely help them. And then again, I just want to stress again these props, because not everyone can do a forward fold. And we can do a forward fold many ways. As you can see, we can be laying on our back and bringing our feet towards our face. That's a forward fold. We can be standing on our feet and letting our head come towards our feet. We could also have the legs on the floor and we're folding forward. So anything that we do, we can change how our position to gravity is and alter that. So if your person cannot do one version of a forward fold, they might be able to do another. And as this lady has a bolster on her knees, you could easily have a chair in front of her with her hands and chin resting on the chair and working the hamstrings in that way. And these are also great things to do if you have a client that you know has a hamstring tear and they're wanting to still participate in yoga. So this concludes the portion of education within the hamstring knowledge. Um, there is so much more I could teach you on this. And this is just kind of skimming the surface, giving you some great tips and tricks that I pass this knowledge on all the time to my clients. And I hope that you can as well, or be able to utilize it for yourself too. I am starting my own yoga school, which will be a hybrid of online learning as well as in person. I've been playing with this idea for a long time and really trying to figure out, like, how can I provide a yoga school that is worthy of adding one more yoga school to our city. There are so many fantastic yoga schools here in Louisville, and I often recommend people to different ones, depending on what their interest is, because they will learn different stuff at each one. And so I ask them a few questions, and I'll be like, I think this studio would be really good for you. Or, there's two or three great studios, but I really think this one would be a better fit for you. You should go check it out. So I'm always recommending people to other yoga schools. The reason I am going about mine in this way is I have found that since becoming a mom, it is very difficult to work on my own self care. And I find this with other people that are in the same boat as me. And so I really want to utilize this online platform so that we can pop into our online yoga class one time every day, 20 minutes or less, and get some work done, learn a lesson. Uh, you memorize things much better when you break it into small chunks. And then instead of going and sitting in a studio space for 16 hours in one weekend just to listen to lecture, I want that in person time to really be the practicing of yoga, the getting the hands on, the asking the questions, the working with partners, the presenting, the teaching, and that to really be really strong quality conversations. Because I don't know about you, but when I was in yoga school, it was the conversations and the tangents that we would go on that I would learn so much more from, and that I would always sit in those lectures and just, oh, I was like, really, why can't we just do videos? Could I watch a video of this? I could be watching a video of this at home. And so I thought, like, when I create my yoga school, like, how can I make it everything that I wish yoga school was for me? And so that's what I'm really hoping to do, to have more like retreat style stuff for our in person. And two, as it's on online platform, you can review it more times. So just tapping in into that. Let's get on to how do you get your continuing education credit. So you will log in to Yoga Alliance at yogaalliance.org, log in, and then you'll click on My Training Hours. You'll then click on Add Training Hours, and you're going to choose that second option for not in person. So those only non-contact hours. Enter the date of which you watched this. Today is International Yoga Day, June 21st. So you could easily put that date in. However, any date that you watched it is completely fine. You can type in that continuing education into the activity is an online presentation with Elizabeth Izzy Nally. And I say that because my Yoga Alliance is under Elizabeth Nally. But as you all know, I go by Izzy. So you can put that on there. The location is FigLeaf.Fit. That is my business. And the category is going to be under that anatomy and physiology for this one. I put that little description of anatomy of the hamstrings, common injuries, and how to recover the hamstrings in yoga class with movement, stretch, and rest. So that's if you'd like to type in more information down on the bottom. I thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you will continue to follow these, give me feedback, leave comments, all that jazz, and suggest me to friends. I really would like to continue my passion, which is teaching the body and teaching yoga. And I really, really love helping people to learn. Um, so if you can help me complete my mission, which is, I feel really my mission in life is to teach yoga, not just the body, but all portions of yoga. Um, let me know what you'd like to learn. I love delving into it and trying to explain things the best way I can. All right. Well, I hope you have a blessed day, a gratitude filled day, and really make the most of your day, your week, and your life.